Good afternoon. This is your tutor of Mathematics Didactics, Advanced Certificate in Secondary Education, IOL. The focus of today's presentation is on our content-based classes in terms of the content that we should cover, and indeed there will also be a mention on topics or things to look out for when it comes to the August 2017 examinations. The contact details of your tutor is being displayed on your screen in terms of the email as well as the contact number in terms of the cell phone number. The contact time, it will be appropriate if you try contacting me from 6 until 8 o'clock in the evenings. I will be available to respond to your queries. But should you have a burning issue or so that you want to be addressed at any other point in time, please feel free to send an email or an SMS for me to get back to you on your specific query. Now, the first part that we will look at is the requirements for us to pass the mathematics didactics as a course. In order for us to write the examinations, we must have obtained 50% or more in the assignments that we did. That being the case, we would also be expected to at least get 50% in the examination itself when we write the examination in order for us to pass the course. The examination paper will be out of 130 marks, of which then we will be required or expected to get at least half of the 130, which would then be around 65 marks in the examination itself. So it is a lot of hard work that we need to put in, a lot of reading, and a lot of thorough preparation in order for us to be ready for the examinations. In terms of the subject, one of the critical things that we need to focus on when we answer our questions is the keywords, the meaning of the keyword. For example, if we are told define the term culture, then the word define means state clearly what that concept is. Not to talk about that concept, but to state clearly what the concept is all about. For example, if you are told define learner-centered education, you are not told discuss, you are not told describe, you have to define. And there is a difference between defining, discussing, and describing. For example, to discuss means to comment on something in your own words. And a discussion also requires you to debate two possibilities or viewpoints, the good side and the bad side, in your discussion. That's what you give when you are dealing with a concept. To explain means to describe something and give the reasons, or in other words, the why and the examples of the how of the specific feature that you are explaining. To describe something means giving reasons and examples of the features of the specific concept that you are explaining. And then we have keywords such as compare or differentiate or distinguish. It means write about the similarities as well as the differences of the concept and draw a conclusion towards the end. Having highlighted the differences and similarities, also draw a conclusion. A description of one phenomena after another is not a comparison. So to compare means you look at similarities and differences, and then you make a concluding statement with regards to the highlighted similarities and differences. And it is the key words are the basis that are directing or guiding us in terms of what to do for a specific question. We might have the correct information, the correct theory, but if the key word as the descriptor of what should be done in that, or how the theory should be organized in answering the specific question, if not followed, we may not score the marks or the points that we deserve in order to move on or to complete the course. So let us pay special emphasis or special attention to the keywords whenever we are doing assignments, whenever we are also answering questions in examination setups. Of course, the keywords are clearly defined in your courses, in terms of in your study guides. So let's consult them and let's be sure that we know what each keyword is telling us to do. In terms of the content, one critical aspect that we need to be aware of as teachers in general and teachers of mathematics in particular is the concept of learner-centered education versus teacher-centered education. The government of the Republic of Namibia on independence introduced the philosophy of learner-centered teaching and learning. Whereas previously we are told in literature that teachers were more teacher-centered in their approach to teaching. Now comes the question of how do these compare? What are the differences between a learner-centered approach to teaching and learning vis-a-vis a teacher-centered approach to teaching and learning? Now, for example, here on our slide, we are looking at a comparison that is given in a table form. We are saying under a learner-centered teaching paradigm, the emphasis is on a variety of methods, and it shifts the role of a teacher from a giver of information to the role of being a facilitator of learning. Whereas in a teacher-centered approach, the teacher is the information giver. The teacher knows it all. The learner comes to the class empty. The learners know nothing. So in a teacher-centered approach, the prior knowledge, prior experiences of learners are not appreciated and are not used as building blocks of the new information that the learner would most likely receive. Teachers in a learner-centered setup, teachers focus on the learning by the learners, and the focus is also on the process of learning. But in a teacher-centered approach, the focus is on the teaching and not on the learning. Learners are active and take responsibility for their own learning in a learner-centered approach, whereas in a teacher-centered approach, the learners are passive and do not take responsibility for their learning because they expect the teachers to teach, and they are only passive and they only receive whatever the teacher is giving them. So that's the most basic comparison that one can give, but it is now expected of us to read more, to look at why, given this comparison, why did our government decide to, or the world, in fact it's a world view, to say the teacher-centered approach is a better approach to teaching and learning because it allows for longer retention. The learners will understand and they will value what they have learned in comparison with a teacher-centered approach. So let's read around these concepts and let's be sure to have clarity and be able to debate them whenever we are expected to do so. In our second slide, we live in a multicultural society, and what we are advocating for in our learner-centered approach to education is that we need to appreciate the culture and the differences that our learners are bringing to our classes. So therefore, culturally, we should also be sensitive to the different learners that are seated in front of us. Therefore, the need for us to also look at the implications of multicultural learning in the teaching of our mathematics class to our learners. How do we take advantage of the cultural experiences, the different cultural experiences that the learners are bringing to class? Now, so that we do not allow any bias portraying this culture as being better than another culture or so. So we are expected to present mathematics in an accurate content. So that is to say, do not allow the cultural background of the topic to overshadow the mathematics content or the content that you want to teach. We need to uphold educational equality or equity, and that is to say, the lesson should take into consideration the entire composition of learners in the class and not just teach mathematics using examples from one particular culture that we might belong to or a culture that we might be familiar with. We should also balance the examples that we give. We need to develop collaboration and empowerment in the entire learning community. We always have to think whether someone from the learning community was left out of the lesson, meaning from our classroom. If we are to give a cultural example to in our mathematics class, how would the other learners feel, either about their culture or either about what is being said within the context of culture? So we need to be cognizant of that also, in order to avoid putting any learner under undue stress or strain because of the work or the selection that we select in terms of the culture as examples. Increase learners' knowledge on various cultures, including their own, and that is to ensure that learners are aware of other cultures after the lessons or did not relate the topic to their own culture. And then we also expected to enable learners' interest and ability to see and think within a multicultural perspective. Learners should appreciate and embrace cultural diversity as assets and not liabilities. So we want to have a setup such that our learners would appreciate that having the different cultures that we have in Namibia, we can take advantage of that in order to excel in our mathematics class and not to take us backwards and to cause unnecessary tension in our classes and so on. Another set of important aspects that we need to look at is the factors that are affecting mathematical performance of our classes or our learners in general in Namibian schools, or perhaps at your particular class. Now here, the factors are many and they are intertwined. So the idea is for us to read up on the factors that affect mathematical performance of our learners. And once we know the factors as teachers, this ought to help us to deal or address the factors so that our learners' performances can increase. Now, these factors that affect poor performance in mathematics are well documented in research articles or in research magazines that people have published over the years. So it is expected of us to read broadly in order for us to deal with these type of issues. For example, one of the factors that might affect the performance of our learners in mathematics is wrong teaching methodologies that are used by teachers. The teaching methods that we use may affect the learners, that how they perform. Secondly, bad or no learning taking place may also affect. If there is bad learning on the part of the learner, or the learner is not learning at all, that will affect the performance, of course. Bad or no understanding taking place. So the learner might have learned, but the understanding did not take place. So that affects performance also. Of course, the limitation to resources, availability of resources on the part of the learner and indeed on the part of teachers may also affect performance. Resources in the form of textbooks, calculators, geometric instruments, and so on may hamper, or electricity may hamper the performance of learners and indeed the teachers in mathematics. Lack of interest in mathematics that is taught in school. So if there is lack of interest in mathematics taught in school on the part of the learners, it may also affect their performance. And this interest is usually lacking if the mathematics is taught as an abstract subject that does not relate to the daily activities of the learners. So we need to make the mathematics relevant to the needs, the current needs of the learners, and indeed the future needs of the learners. Then they will start seeing and valuing the importance of mathematics in their lives. The general perception, the general thought that mathematics is a difficult subject may also hamper performance, in that some people may feel mathematics is in any case a difficult subject and it's not meant for me, so why should I bother doing it, or I will always fail. So those type of thoughts are also thoughts that may affect the performance of our learners in mathematics, and therefore the need that we address those thoughts as subject teachers and indeed within our communities at parent meetings and so on, in order for us to create a picture and a laugh for mathematics for our learners to do better. So you are most welcome to read up on factors that affect performance in mathematics or cause learners to do poor in mathematics. And in identifying these factors, it is also important that you provide possible solutions to how to overcome these factors that are causing the mathematical poor performance. Then we have the direct teaching strategy. So we need to know exactly what the direct teaching strategy is and how it can be implemented. The direct instruction, by definition, refers to a rigorous, developed and highly scripted method of teaching that is fast-paced and provides constant interaction between students and the teacher. This method is rich in structure and drill. And the philosophy behind the direct teaching method is that if the child has not learned, the teacher has not taught. So if no learning takes place, then no teaching took place. Because if teaching took place, then learning must have taken place. That's what the direct teaching strategy says. Okay, so, and this strategy challenges us to teach so that the learners can learn. In other words, if no teaching, no learning took place, then it means teaching did not take place. Most essentially, the direct teaching strategy has 8 essential components in it. In order for us to implement the direct teaching approach, there are 8 things that should be in place in terms of our lesson plans, in terms of our implementation of the lesson. First and foremost, we should have objectives and goals. So, meaning the lesson's objectives must be clearly defined and in line with the educational standards that are there. Then we have the anticipatory set. So, meaning before we dig deep into the meat, into the content of our lesson, or with the content of our instruction, we need to set the stage to tap into the prior knowledge of our learners. That is where we call it sometimes the catch and focus phase of the lesson. Then we have the direct instruction. When writing is, for example, when we are writing our lesson plan, this is the section where you explicitly explain or explicitly indicate on your lesson plan how you will present the lesson's content to your learners. And then the guided practice, it's where what we at times call classwork, where under your supervision, the learners are given a chance to practice and to apply the skills, the knowledge, the theories that we have taught them through the direct instruction. And towards the end, we have closure. At this section, we outline how you will wrap up the lesson, how you will close the lesson by giving the lesson's concepts further meaning and to your learners. Independent practice, this is where we provide homework to our learners and assignments that they have to do at home and so on. In the direct teaching strategy, it is also essential for us to well in advance identify the materials, the resources, the equipment that we will be using in order for our learners not to be disadvantaged because of lack of resources, calculators, rulers, pencil, and the likes in terms of the stationery. Of course, we need to also have our assessment strategies in place and indeed follow up. So it means that once we have taught, there should be assessment linked to that specific lesson or to the specific content in order for us to follow up. It could be a test, it could be worksheets that we are giving so that we can assess the learning that took place and if need be reteach or continue on to the next topic or chapter because we know the learners have learned or have mastered the content that we wanted them to master. Of course, it is also expected of us to know something about experimental as well as theoretical probability. The definition and examples of theoretical as well as experimental probability will be expected to come from us. Where we say experimental probability as an example is equal to the number of event occurrences divided by the total number of trials, whereas theoretical probability is the number of favorable outcomes divided by the number or the total of outcomes in the end. So know the difference between theoretical and experimental probability and be able to give mathematical examples to that effect also. Then comes the issue of mathematics is about problem solving. But now, what is a mathematical problem and what are the features of a valid, relevant mathematical problem? In mathematics, a mathematical problem is a task or an activity for which the student or the learner have no prescribed or memorized rules or methods, nor is there a perception by students that there is a specific correct solution to that specific problem. That is a mathematical problem. Now the feature or the features of a good mathematical problem for students, it must begin where the students are. The problematic or the engaging aspect of the problem must be due to the mathematics that the learners are to learn. It should not be because we want to punish them. It should be about what the learners are to learn. And thirdly, it must require justification or explanation for answers and methods used. That should be the features of a good mathematical problem to give to the learners. And we indeed are having various mathematical problem solving strategies. Okay? In terms of problem solving strategies, we should be able to use a number of problem solving strategies to solve our problems in mathematics. We can draw a picture, we can act it out, we can use a model, we look for a pattern, we guess and check, make a table or a chart, try a simplified form of the problem, make an organized list, or write out an equation and solve it. So those are all strategies that could be used to solve mathematical problems. They do not end with that. These are some of the strategies that I decided to highlight here. Our our study guide is touching on a number of problem-solving strategies and steps that are involved in problem solving. Let's read up on them. Let's be competent in answering questions that deals with problem solving. Of course, assessment is indeed a very critical component of our course. We need to know how to assess learners correctly in mathematics. But before we get to knowing how to assess learners correctly, we need to know what assessment is. Assessment is the process of gathering evidence about students' knowledge, abilities, and disposition towards mathematics, as well as making inferences or making decisions from that evidence for a variety of purposes. So we are saying we want to gather evidence about students' knowledge and ability in mathematics. And this evidence that we are gathering is used for different purposes. For example, we might want to evaluate the programs that the learners are doing. So, and when the purpose is to evaluate programs, the outcome is the modification of programs. Alternatively, we want to monitor the learner's progress, and the outcome of that will be to promote the growth of the learners in the subject. Alternatively, we could be evaluating learners' achievement, and when we evaluate learners' achievement, we want to recognize accomplishment, giving learners awards and so on, because they have done well, they have accomplished something. Or alternatively, we might want to make instructional decisions. So we may teach our learners, assess them, in order to see whether to continue instructing them using the methods that we used, or alternatively to improve on the instruction by making modifications in order for us to be more effective at transferring the knowledge correctly to the learners. Now, in terms of assessment, when it comes to external examinations, we, especially in our setup now, grade 10 and 12, we have what is referred to as examiner's reports. So after every examination, the examiner, the person that set up the question papers, they look at, and the markers, they look at how learners responded on particular topics within the exams. Then they write a report, and these reports are usually pointing out the common mistakes that learners made during the course of that examinations, and they guide the teachers, the examiner's reports now, guide teachers on the methods to use to help learners to avoid mistakes made in future, so that they cannot repeat the same mistakes. And they also guide teachers to understand how marking is done at the end of the year, and that will hopefully help the teachers to prepare learners much better for end of year external examinations. And they also point out expectations of examiners with respect to the different topics and how the topics should be covered in the syllabi by the students. Of course, it is about learning, and we need to know something about the learning theory, the constructivist theories and the socio-cultural theories of learning. What are they? What are they saying, and what are they proposing, and how do they define learning, and how do they describe learning in terms of knowledge acquisition? We have the zone of proximal development. What is it? And how can we take advantage of our knowledge of the learning theories in order for us to teach better in our classes? So those are some of the things that we need to focus on in preparing, in going through the course outlines and preparing for the end of year, for the August examinations. Again, thank you very much for your attention. My contact details are again reflected on the slide. Please send me an email, send me an SMS, or give me a call so that we can discuss specific problems or that you might have while going through and preparing for your upcoming examinations. All the best of luck, and hope to hear from you whenever you need guidance from me.